the surrendered yes. It was like, I want whatever it's going to require for me to depend on you. Like, that sacrifice is so sacred. And I don't want to get comfortable because I don't want to grow complacent. I want to actually be on my hands and my knees and just go, Lord, I want to live a life of sacrifice. And if I'm getting too comfortable, shake it up.
You know, my husband was a youth pastor for years. And then he came to me, you know, youth pastors don't make a lot of money. And he came to me and he said, I really feel like I'm supposed to resign. And I'm just supposed to get in our Honda Civic and drive up and down I-95 and just go wherever God tells us to go. And we'll just do whatever. And of course, in my brain, I thought, okay, I'm getting a full-time job. I'm getting a full-time job. And I was offered a television producer position. And I thought, this is great. I will be the source of income and John can go and do whatever. And I remember it all made sense on paper, but God said to me, somebody else can be that man's television producer, but you're the only one that can be John's wife. You sacrifice the money and you go up and down I-95 corridor in the Honda Civic with him, and you be there for him. Wow. And you know what was so crazy was I had been a television producer in Dallas and was making a twice the amount of money John was. And then I decided to stay home with the kids, but my husband was a youth pastor, but we had one car and so everything was okay. We were just barely making it. And then he zeroes us out. But I remember God said, you can either see this as sacrifice or you can see this as sowing. And I think sometimes we forget that what we lay down in one season, when you said to make it holy, Laurie, that means we consecrate it. That means we say, God, you know what? I'm going to give you this next season, because there's only a certain amount of time that my kids were little. And there was only a certain amount of time when I could actually be on the road with my husband before they had to go to school. And I said, I'm going to sow that season. And then it's going to be consecrated to God. And I also remember when I had to start staying back, remember when I thought, okay, maybe I'm just for breeding, maybe I'm just for a tribe. And I found that if I complained, the grace would lift. But if I said, no, I am sowing, the one who stays home gets the same reward as the one who goes to battle. I'm going to live in the promise that I am staying home and I am guarding the supplies. And I remember the day came where, you know, like when I was working in Dallas, I had to have work clothes. I had to eat out because I was always coming home late. There was childcare I had to pay for. I remember the day where a check came to me from a publisher. And when I opened it up, God said, this is all of the money you thought you sacrificed. This is all, I've given it back to you. What you sowed in one season, I'm giving it back to you in this season. And so I want people to know that it's sacred when you say, God, I'm going to give this to you, because anything I've ever given to God, he never gives it back to me the same. He breaks it apart. Yeah. He multiplies it. He scatters the seed and it comes back in a fuller way. And so I love that, Toni, I love that you were brave enough to say there's some people out here, we don't like the word service. We don't like to hear, especially serving in secret. Now, we might be okay with serving if we could put it on our Instagram, but serving in secret? No, we'll do celebrity serving, but not secret serving. And the idea of sacrifice is like, are you kidding me?
A lot of people talk about contentment, right? And what is sacrifice? So I'm just going to read this real quick and kind of tell a quick illustration of it. But obviously Philippians 4:12, I know both how to make do with little and I know how to make do with a lot. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being content. Whether well-fed or hungry, whether in abundance or in need, I am able to do all things through him who strengthens me. This isn't a verse about achievement. It's a verse about contentment. And I look back on our marriage. Gabe is a dreamer. And when we were dating, we were like writing our little napkin dreams at this little Billy Joe's ice cream parlor in Lynchburg, Virginia, where we started dating. And we would just want to be world changers, but we didn't grow up with any means and had nothing given to us either beyond as far as finances go. Obviously, we had a wealth of Christian heritage and prayer given to us from our parents. But when we went out, it was about 5 years into our marriage, he wanted to leave his job. Cade had been born, Down syndrome, diagnosis kind of changed the trajectory of our lives, and the things that were front and center became back burner, and everything that we thought was valuable, we just didn't care any about. And we just wanted to kind of get on our face before God, because we'd already known kind of like not having much. And it didn't even feel like sacrifice. It felt like we're together, like we're in this together. And it almost felt like it's freedom, because I think sometimes when we get a lot of stuff and we think that like the things we want God gives, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh wait, now we got to manage all the things we want. And then all of a sudden we like lose sight of the goal here is freedom is a slow and steady process of just handing things over. Just slowly, like the free man has nothing left to lose, right? Wow. So it's getting back to that, going like, wow, actually the sacrifice is the secret. And we had to come together, and I was like, bring our greatest fears, and mine was provision, and his was to leave and launch this nonprofit, and not really just take a job out of security, but not kind of stay in the center of trusting. And finally, I just really trusted that even in this kind of like risk of, we got down to, we had a little nonprofit that we started, and now it's our organization. But at the time, we hosted a gathering, and when we paid our bills, we had $200 in the bank. And this is after about 10 months of launching this nonprofit. Now, again, this was 18 years ago, almost 19 years ago. And that week, a $10,000 check came in the door. Our first real gift, our first real donation to the ministry, because we had sown it personally. And the Lord was just like, I'm going to give you what you need when you need it, but I want you to follow me. And so it felt like sacrifice initially, but honestly, I wouldn't trade it, because it kind of grew faith
It was
upon
an adventure.
faith upon faith. Yes.
It was
And
an
then he wanted
adventure.
to move us to New York City with a special needs son at age 9, and sell everything we had and go to Manhattan at the time. And I was kind of kicking and screaming. But then when we got to it, it was like, oh, wow, Lord, you did so much in that adventure. And I sometimes go, God, when you invited us to adopt Joy, right? And you invited us to, like, at 20 years of marriage, decide to bring home a little girl from China with special needs.
Which could be sacrifice.
But it was back to the idea of like the surrendered yes. It was like, I want whatever it's going to require for me to depend on you. Like that sacrifice is so sacred. And I don't want to get comfortable, because I don't want to grow complacent. I want to actually be on my hands and my knees and just go, Lord, I want to live a life of sacrifice. And if I'm getting too comfortable, shake it up.
I get exactly what you're saying. And I love those stories, Rebekah. I love that, the way you called it, that sanctity, the sanctity of sacrifice, because that's what God wants us to do. In everything that he tells us to do that sounds so hard and so everything and so just no fun, all of that is to give us such treasures of love and goodness. If we could just see that and live like that, it would just be amazing.
We're talking about sacrifice, and just even in my own life, thinking about sacrificing for God, I will honestly say that for me, it's much easier to sacrifice for God than it is to sacrifice for my husband.
It's easier to sacrifice for your kids, too, than your husband.
For my kids. And and I don't always see it the same way when we're talking about these seeds that we're sowing, like you said, Lisa. For me, I have to remember that those painful moments of giving, laying down my life, grabbing a cup of water in the middle of the night, or cooking when I don't feel like cooking, or helping with the kids, or whatever it is in the moment that doesn't feel glorious, it doesn't feel holy, it doesn't feel glamorous, that sacrificing for my husband, giving, being selfless, giving to my family, that is part of kingdom work, even though it doesn't always look and feel the same way. But I will say on the other side of the spectrum, and I think this is important, especially for us as women, is to realize that sacrifice and passivity are not the same thing. And I think sometimes in the name of selflessness in our relationships, we stay quiet, we go inward, we don't share our needs or our desires or our feelings in the name of sacrifice, but really we're actually being passive. And I don't believe that God has that for us either. You know, it's not about being quiet and silencing your needs or desires, but it's about considering my desires and considering my spouse's desires as equal. Like, we're bringing them both to the feet of Jesus. How can I meet your needs? How can I help you do what God has called you to do? And so I think it's important for us as women, because I think we do have a tendency sometimes to just shut down and say, I'm just being selfless for Jesus, when really I'm not necessarily being healthy, or I'm harboring bitterness and resentment because I needed my husband to do A, B, and C, and I didn't actually tell him.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe today and you'll never miss a new upload.
And don't forget to check out our Better Together shop. Thanks for being a part of our community.